It's an amazing experience to come and hear people sharing their strategies together. Interestingly, when I told my boss that I was coming to the MetaPack conference where the theme was Future Now, he didn't translate it as something that would be visionary. He just said, yeah, the future now would be really good. And having listened to people, I feel a little bit like Liz Taylor's eighth husband on their wedding night, in that I know what to do, but I'm just not sure how to make this interesting for you. What we thought is that we'd go super big on the title and just try and give you a sense of what we'd been seeing since we started the business in the world of click and collect. And I thought that rather than talk about Doddle, which we've kind of branded the seats and put it on the walls, we'd talk a little bit about the experiences we found in running a click and collect operation and how retailers themselves can benefit from some of the advances in technology that are going on, just to see how they can improve their own operation. I wanted to start, though, because we can talk about what's going on in the click and collect space itself. And this is intriguing because it's beginning to grow pretty quick, which is good if you're in a startup and you've got a mortgage to pay. But it's also exciting because it's very clear that customers are choosing convenience alongside other factors like cost. There's been a 30% growth year on year in the percentage of volume that multi-channels are seeing go into click and collect. And that's actually now making 30% of the total order numbers. Of course, it would be irreverent of me not to mention John Lewis, who are lauded for their incredible performance across click and collect. And they have this year seen 52% of all of their online orders fulfilled through the click and collect network, which of course includes Waitrose. Stunningly, and again, somewhat of a relief, by 2020, those click and collect volumes will have tripled to 220 million parcels. That's a significant rise and is way outperforming the rest of the matrix in regards to growth through online orders. And I think that it's important to note that click and collect is now not just seen as a driver of retail growth. It is a driver of retail growth. It's not just a fulfillment channel. People are starting to think about how to make this experience better. And fundamentally, we agree with that, and we see it through some of the stats that bore out from the performance of our business. But more importantly, we see it by talking to e-com directors who are saying that actually in their business, by focusing on different delivery options, they're beginning to see greater revenue growth. And of course, customers are starting to vote with their feet and with their fingers if the experience isn't what you'd expect. And I guess this, for me, is where we should start the journey of talking about click and collect. So this is it's a really awkward pantomime, so I'm going to get you to all be involved. Who here is the head of click and collect in their business? Yes, one person, two people, three people, three, yes! 3 people. That is absolutely perfect because it sums up our experience all the time. And at Doddle, obviously, we've built our own network of click and collect stores. But what we've actually been finding is that retailers have been inviting us in to talk about how to improve the click and collect experience. And the first thing that we find is that click and collect is the Area 51 of retail. It's that bit that sits between a few people, and no one really wants to talk about it. Or they do want to talk about it, but they don't want to talk about it insofar as much as they don't have responsibility for it. And if they do take responsibility, well, it's not really my fault. It was the supply chain guy that really screwed stuff up. So what we see is that responsibility for click and collect sitting between the supply chain director, the e-com director, and this is nice, sexy music as well to go with it. I'm digging that. Sorry if I start moving. The e-com director and the retail director. The e-com director just wants to sell more stuff online. The supply chain director just wants the e-com director to shut up and stop whinging. And the retail director just wants the stuff to be brought to them and stop bothering their nightmare FTE scheduling. And I find that when we're facilitating sessions, and for those more broadly educated in the room amongst you, that's Ban Ki-moon. He is the chief diplomat of the United Nations, and we find that we are positioned as that person. It's kind of awkward in some respects because we're trying to negotiate the relationship between the people in our retail partners' organizations to make click and collect something that actually makes sense to them. So, just to kind of hark back to why it makes sense. It should be an area that grows revenue. It should, through decent consolidation, drive a more efficient supply chain. And of course, for those of you that are wearing hemp shirts, I know it's not cool to say it, but it's kind of good for the environment, so I feel okay stood up talking to you about it today. So what is this making click and collect sexy stuff all about? I feel slightly embarrassed saying it live, but still, I think that we've got an opportunity to make click and collect sexy for retailers. And why is this important? Well, just 2 stats to give you some sense. We're told in customer surveys that staff take too long to locate orders on internal systems. I know we're all thinking about sexy bits of handheld and smart kits, but actually the reality is most people are still writing it down and disappearing off. In fact, when they disappear off, what happens is people get really peed off waiting for the click and collect order to be picked up. And so you find that there is a member of the public who stood at the desk waiting and figuring out whether the member of staff has gone off for a pee or for a coffee break or whatever else it might be, and then they come back. Aha! It's not because they've gone for a coffee break, it's because the system's pants and they've not really thought about the click and collect experience, because all that's driving the business is, yeah, but they might buy something extra in store when they come along. Well, let's have a look at that as we go through. So what we've tried to do is to give you a takeaway, because obviously M&S has got a business it can talk about and some of its experiences, as has Wix. We don't have that much of a business, so we wanted to talk about our KPIs, things that you could take away to look at your click and collect experience and measure how successfully you're deploying it in your own organization. And we've neatly split that between 2 areas, stole brazenly from Disney. We've got on stage and we've got backstage. And if you're not thinking about your business in those 2 ways, then I think you are already beginning to make some fatal errors. On stage, there's a few points that you should be looking at. Think about whether your pre and post click and collect communications are doing what they're supposed to do. Then think about whether your online experience and your in-store experience is truly aligned. And I know we're here to talk about multi-channel, but I think there's a few examples we'll give later on that suggest that people aren't thinking about it in that way, particularly when it comes to igniting the passions of your store colleagues who deliver this service. The fifth one, to think about is the transaction itself. Be really, really focused on the transaction. And the KPIs you should be thinking about are creating a seamless experience. And that should mean things like do the opening hours for the store, agree both online and in the comms that you're sending out. And is there a map on there? These are unbelievably basic points, but stuff that is forgotten at such a simple level in many an organization. Furthermore, don't put obstacles in the way of customers coming into the store to get their click and collect. So an example of that would be, is there any extra ID needed to pick something up? Because there's nothing more frustrating than schlepping all the way to a retail environment and then not being able to pick up your click and collect. The third KPI is, are you focusing on the opportunity to cross-sell and upsell? Is that something you've thought about? And at the moment, I would say this is the most basic error. There is really very little being done to make that experience faultless and flawless. It just seems as though we're flogging stuff, as you do at a train station in a popular newsagent when they try and give you a dairy milk, a bottle of water, and a telegraph at 6:55 in the morning. That is not a good combination of gifts to give to someone when they're trying to get out of the store in a hurry. From a backstage perspective, it's a little bit more droll, but absolutely in line with the logistics guys. It's thinking about how you take the arrival of the parcel, where you store it. It's then thinking about the transaction and locating that parcel and making sure that ultimately the experience with the customer goes from back office and backstage to on stage seamlessly as you can make it. So for these KPIs, we thought, well, there's a really important one to think about, which is time. Are you delivering the click and collect order to a customer as quickly as you could? We aim in Doddle for 30 seconds to be in and out. Bertrand nailed me this morning by saying he'd done it in 22 seconds. I'm pretty sure he served himself, which is slightly unfair. But 30 seconds is the option. We've timed it at 11 minutes. 11 minutes, and that was in a top 10 UK retailer. And it's awkward. Who is in charge of this stuff? Well, there's only 3 of you in charge of the UK's click and collect operation at the moment, so not that many people. Second one is, where can you automate to help people create these fast transactions? So does the kit work offline? So when people are scanning parcels in and doing the fun stuff, the beep, beep, beep in the background, when the Wi-Fi drops in store, and I know that never happens, and thanks to Gary, our CTO, that never does happen in our stores, but it's important that the team can continue to actually get these parcels put across the shelf and then ultimately let the customers know that they can come and collect that stuff. The third KPI is, are you taking every single data point you possibly can that the customers are giving you and building it into a future experience? There is an awful lot of information flowing through Click and Collect that is not being grasped and grappled with to improve a customer's experience. And I think that's really where we'll go on to just to try and talk a bit about how you can improve the overall experience. Now, improving the overall experience can be done using drugs, but not in the sense that you're all potentially thinking, because I've seen a few of you, I'm not sure about your nocturnal activities. But let's look at this video from Simon Sinek and see what he's talking about.
Because we know when you get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It's why we like it, it's why we keep going back to it. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive, right? We have age restrictions on smoking, gambling, and alcohol, and we have no age restrictions on social media and cell phones, which is the equivalent of opening up the liquor cabinet and saying to our teenagers, hey, by the way, this adolescence thing, if it gets you down. But that's basically what's happening. That's basically what's happening, right?
So he talks about the effect of dopamine. Now, a lot of e-com directors have looked at the way that dopamine enhances the checkout process, and we've been doing some work ourselves, and we think that we're maybe missing something of a trick here. So dopamine, just to give you the boring, I was told I wasn't allowed to wear a lab coat today. I said it would be too awkward and a bit cheesy. Apologies for that. But we looked at the chemistry behind it, and dopamine is that temporary thing that's related to stuff like eating good food. Dopamine gets released. Foreplay. It's the first time anyone said foreplay at the delivery conference. I've said it 4 times now. The other thing is, when I'm now awkward, I'm told to see you all naked, and the 2 things are really weird. The third thing is that when a parcel is on its way, dopamine's released. And what's really, really interesting is that there are actually examples where we enhance that experience. And so the guys at DPD, really good about delivery notification. Every time you're notified about your parcel being on its way, you get a hit of dopamine. It's like, yes! The problem is it's all anticipation. It's all the build-up, and we know what happens when there's all build-up and no satisfaction, okay? The satisfaction is the fundamental part of any transaction online. It's where the virtual becomes the reality. And it's this release of oxytocin that really is the holy grail for retailers when it comes to delivering a fantastic online experience. Now, oxytocin is slightly different. I just have to look at my notes to make sure I've got to say it, haven't I? I have to say it. Oxytocin is released when you have an orgasm, okay? So, online shopping and browsing, great, dopamine hit, but actually the thing you're really after, I've been told, is oxytocin. When you don't get satisfaction, you have mass frustration. It's really annoying. And we've all been there. We've all experienced that frustration of where's my stuff. Now, typically, and we've heard a lot about millennials today, whatever they are, but people turn to Twitter and go mental. That is not great. That is not building a huge amount of loyalty and love for your brand. And so we challenge ourselves to think about how you can get fulfillment to be the conversation that you're having internally, so that dopamine, the process of buying online, and the satisfaction of having an amazing delivery are combined to create what can only be described as a love-making moment. Now, that love-making moment, come on, kids, come with me. This is like GCSE biology. Everyone's awkward, but no one wants to leave because they're kind of fascinated. This is what's happening. This is what your brands should be trying to aspire to, and this is what we're advising lots of our customers about. Not necessarily the dynamic, but more importantly, that studies have shown, neuroeconomic studies have shown, that when oxytocin is released, customers' generosity increases. Now that is kind of magic. So, I mean, these guys are excited as well. Love that. Next year we're bringing music. But when generosity increases, then something else really important happens. Trust develops. So, if you've got great levels of dopamine being built up, You've got high levels of oxytocin being released. You're seeing generosity increasing, and you're seeing trust develop. What do you think happens? That's right. Boom! You get some P&L magic. And this is the bit where we talk about ourselves. Because the strange thing is, and I have to say, when we started the business, we had no idea. None. But it just so happens that across all of our retailers who've chosen to adopt the Doddle stores, we're seeing a 14% higher value in the basket. We're seeing an 11% higher size, so more items in the basket. And we're seeing a 3 times higher frequency of purchase. Now that is in part down to the sexy magic and the drugs that we're using to help customers get through this process, but it's also down to the fact that people are focusing on click and collect. And everyone wants an NPV like 215 times higher lifetime value. What's important is I heard Bertrand talk about the same-day delivery offering earlier and the NPS score around it. Yes! 82! Beat him. So you can take his 22 minutes. Our NPS is 82, and we are absolutely convinced that by delivering a decent experience, by thinking about how to make this special for customers, by turning the parcel around so they can read the label when you hand it over, that's the difference in actually building brand loyalty and a value and repeat purchase life cycle from customers that makes a difference to your P&L. So just remember, anticipation plus satisfaction divided by experience is the key to success. Why divided by experience? Don't screw it up. So I have one question for you. Does anyone here know what Stockholm Syndrome is? Yes. It's where you fall in love with your captors. Basically happens to people who are taken hostage. I can only describe the ideology of giving free click and collect to your customers, but making them go to the 4th floor of your city centre store during their lunch break and making them walk through the whole retail environment to get their click and collect as Stockholm Syndrome. Are you truly delivering what the customer wants, and are you making the experience of click and collect fantastic? Because I'm not sure you are, and I think you may be lying to yourself if you do. So it would be remiss of us not to talk about our predictions for 2017. In the light of things going on across the pond, let's hope we see the end of it. We think there's big love, though, and that wouldn't surprise you from the previous slides in the presentation. We think that everyone's going to start sharing stuff. We are, of course, agnostic. We're open access, and our colleagues at Collect Plus have decided to go that way too. And come on in. The water is warm, and we're delighted to welcome you. We also think, though, that the mention that Patrick made earlier about Dice and the John Lewis Clipper relationship will be fundamental in changing the way that customers are ultimately looked after, whether that's by delivering synergies on price or flexibility of delivery options. Second one is this notion, this guy from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, terrifying, right? People are recoiling in fear of this guy. All free today. It's an absolute facade. It's not really free. In fact, it's only free because you're either deciding that you have to keep up with the Joneses, but are you really thinking about the best ways to consolidate offers? I'm intrigued about ASOS Premier and New Look Delivery Pass and how they're going to dominate the market. But we have to find and figure out better ways to consolidate those orders and give customers an experience that actually they want, rather than just making something free, but making them have the IKEA shopping route all the way through a store. So let's think about how we can make things a little bit more seamless from the back office through to the front office. The last one is, just from an experience in store, it stuns me, absolutely stuns me, how naive we are about stuff. So when you go to get a click and collect order, how often have you given your team members X-ray goggles so they can see inside the bag? Yeah, it's not happening. So I heard that Doddle now do this. You can actually see, at the point of handing over the click and collect order, what's inside. That might make it easier to talk about how you can upsell. I mean, call me mad, but otherwise you're taking a guess and looking at what they're wearing. Obviously, there's other things that you can do, though. So if you know what's in the bag, you could have prompts served to people. Halfords last year started a service where they sent notifications about click and collect customers to devices. What is really stunning is that now you could actually give them a sales prompt about the latest sale that's going on. Or indeed, rather than customers like you have bought this, it could be, Mr. Earnshaw, we saw that you were browsing black heels. Why don't you go and buy them in store today and take 10% off? I don't know, it might just be me and we might just be nuts, but we kind of think that might be a more relevant shopping experience for most customers out there. The last thing to say is we nicked the title from the Indrory song, Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll. I thought it would spice things up and make things a bit more interesting. Weirdly, this was actually the first verse. Here's a bit of advice, you're quite welcome, it's free. Don't do nothing that's cut price, you'll know what they'll make you be. They will try their tricky device, trap you with the ordinary, get your teeth into a small slice, the cake of liberty. We have a view that click and collect doesn't necessarily need to be free. We've got a view that the way that we present these ideas to the consumer doesn't need to be free today. Just think about what you're offering and the experience you're trying to provide for them. Thank you very much, we're here all day. Thanks.